Deathloop is a very unique game, and not just in a story-driven first-person shooter, but also their take on the roguelike elements that so many games as of late have ventured into. When I try and explain it to people, it takes some doing, and that's a good thing. The FPS genre, and roguelike for that matter, is becoming stale in almost every way. As much as I love the genre of story-driven FPS, even I can see that new ideas have been few and far between. Thankfully, however, Arcane has managed to do something very different that's a ton of fun, and I could not put it down until the credits rolled. It's funny because leading up to this game's release, I barely noticed it, and whenever a trailer of information about it came out, I just didn't really care. I was indifferent. I think it was the roguelike aspects of this game that initially put me off, as my experience with those types of games have not been great. First off, I've never beat a roguelike I have tried. I played Dead Cells, Hades, and sunk my teeth into Returnal when it came out. My problem is you play, you die, and then you start over with little to no carryover. Eventually, after 20 hours or so, I gave up on those games. Now, the reason I usually don't finish a game is because I get bored or end up not liking it, not because I feel like it's completely wasting my time. Returnal for me was the last nail in the coffin for roguelikes, and the one that really set me up to think Deathloop was not for me. I was wrong. Deathloop was definitely for me. I just didn't know it. My main issue with roguelikes is feeling like nothing I do really matters unless I finish it in one sitting, meaning I could play for hours and not progress. Deathloop, on the other hand, while there are roguelike elements, I would say it takes the best a roguelike has to offer and makes something fresh, fun, and original. The biggest thing for me is Deathloop respected my time. Even if I died and looped back to the beginning of the day, all the information I have gathered, and there is a metric crap ton, stays with me and helps me to my goal. Deathloop is not your typical FPS where you go from point A to B shooting everyone. While killing is required to complete your goal, gathering information and exploring is mandatory. The more information you have, the easier it is to complete the goal of the game, which was initially shrouded in mystery for someone like me that barely paid attention to it. The goal of this game is to break the Deathloop, hence the name. Our main character finds himself in, whereby he is repeating the same day over and over again, even if he dies. You later find out in order to do this, you have to kill 7 specific people, or visionaries, to break the loop that a protagonist Colt finds himself in. Sounds easy, right? Well, that's where it gets complicated. You have to complete this in one day, separated in 4 different, very large and intricately put together levels that are separated by time. That's morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. Initially, I thought, how different could they be? And it turns out they are very different and all fun to explore. What you do or don't do and who you kill or don't kill in the morning can affect the afternoon or evening. And this goes on and on with probably an infinite number of possibilities until either you die 3 times or you simply cycle through the entire day. Your arsenal to assist you along your bloody way is varied and a lot of fun. Colt has, of course, the usual shotguns, machine guns, sniper rifles, etc. The way they keep it interesting is there are different rarities for each type of weapon. And not only that, but the higher tiers have special attributes, a la firing silently or not using ammo if shots are not missed. Along with this are trinkets, which can give even further customization to your weapons, like increasing ammo or giving longer range. There are a lot of options at your disposal. Colt also has abilities called slabs that allow him to teleport or levitate enemies. On top of all that, Colt has skills that you can assign 4 at a time, which include increases to health or the ability to double jump. There are a ton of different builds that you can take. I primarily focused on stealth using silenced weapons and the Aether slab, which makes you almost invisible. Almost. What Deathloop does that most other roguelikes don't is as you collect a material called Residium during your gameplay, when you're done with each section, you are able to apply those to the items you picked up along the way so as not to lose them on your next run. Not only that, but essentially you get 3 lives each go and they reset with each new time period. This is where Deathloop gets it so right and doesn't feel like when you fail, you wasted all that time. Speaking of not wasting my time, it also keeps all the information you gathered and it organizes it for you. Initially, I was overwhelmed at the idea of being able to complete this seemingly daunting task. Eventually, once the game opens up more and you can go to any time period you want, I just explored. As I did this, I started getting more and more information, and almost everything is extremely important to your main goal. The game gives you waypoints, which I initially didn't pay attention to. However, I found the more I followed the breadcrumbs, the quicker I was able to acquire vital information on my targets or get a new weapon or slab. You can search as much as you want in each time period, and I think because I did that, it made the latter half of the game easier than the first half. I wonder how much more difficult this game would be if they didn't put all your little discoveries in nice little plot threads that eventually you select and follow the waypoints. My thought is this game could have been really frustrating if this were not implemented correctly. And with how much fun and time I got out of this, I think they made the right choice. Lastly, I originally mentioned 7 targets to kill. Well, actually there are 8. And the last visionary is Juliana. If Colt's main job is to break the loop, then Juliana is actively trying to protect it. The way this works is when you are in an area where there is opportunity to kill one of your targets, Juliana can spawn randomly into the game, disguised as an NPC to kill you and thus protect the loop. The kicker is if playing the game online, Juliana is controlled by another person, which makes things very dicey to say the least. Juliana has special powers also, and if she catches you slipping, she will let you have it. Now, thankfully, you can choose to either only let your friends jump in your game, or you can have it controlled by the game itself. This is a great option, especially in the beginning when you keep butting heads with someone online that has way more options at their disposal. As far as the graphics go, when I booted up Deathloop for the first time, I was pleasantly surprised by the visuals and graphical options that are available. I wish more games would give the players options like this. If you care about raw graphics and ray tracing features, then you're covered, albeit at 30 frames per second. And if you want a solid 60 frames per second, they got you covered. And if you don't mind the frame rate fluctuating, but you still want better visuals, they got an option for you as well. I just want choices. Let me have the choice. And Deathloop delivers that in spades. I ended up initially choosing the ray tracing mode, and while it looks fantastic, the performance mode is way better suited for this game. The shooting feels great, especially at 60 frames per second, and at the forefront of combat, much more so than Dishonored series you may be familiar with. The lighting, shadows, and detail in each level is great. It's not photoreal, but much more realistic than Dishonored ever was. The level design in this game is great, and even after playing the game for 20 plus hours, I was still discovering new entry points, new paths, or vantage points to get to the info or access to a target I was after. Something that Arcane does really well in that whatever you can see, you can get to or on top of. After you get the shift slab, which is a must in my opinion, the verticality makes getting around a breeze. The levels are intricately woven, labyrinth-like, and full of puzzles and hidden treasures worth your time. My only gripe, and it's a nitpick, is I wish water didn't instantly kill you when you fall in. That could have opened things up even more. Sound design is another really great shining example of how to make a game as immersive as possible. All the voice acting is top-notch, and the amount of dialogue is incredible. You may think the repeating day you might hear a lot of repeated dialogue, and yes, there is some. However, the majority is new, and most importantly, it's interesting. Guns sound great, and the haptic triggers and resistant depending on which gun you are using, just as a shining example of how to take the DualSense controller and further use it to immerse the player. Another great use of the controller, as much as I like playing with headphones, is hearing Juliana taunt you through the controller. Another quality of life is you can listen to recordings in the game while you're reading another document without one canceling out the other. To wrap it all up in a bow, Deathloop is a finely tuned game, almost to the nth degree. Arcane set out to tell a story and give players something they have never really had before. It's hard to find fault with the game outside of some occasional dumb AI. In practice, even when geared up, they are a real threat, and it doesn't take much to put Cole down. The amount of creativity that is given to the player is remarkable, and the amount of options to access and take down your targets is something Arcane is at the top of their game with this release. I'm sure it's blatantly obvious. Pick this game up, even if you don't like roguelikes.